So the life cycle and key dates for this one. So we have the community grants program and RADIP, which is a regional arts development. Both open at the same time, and they're both bring each other in terms of grants. So they're both open on the both open on the August, closing on the 14th of September. So it's a 6-week. Once the application is closed, phases that we go through are first of all pre-assessment. So that's where I go through and check all the applications. Then moves on to an assessment phase. So the assessment phase is where a council officer who is not related to the project at all assesses the application. So to give you an example of that, for example, it's a sport and recreation based project. May have spoken to Amanda Tye, who's council officer, about that project pre-application. So she won't be the one assessing it at all. Transparent in the assessment phase. Once it's been assessed, the application goes to a moderator. That's where the officer the application to the moderators meeting. So the moderators are a panel of senior staff which have had no input into the assessment discussions with any operation due. Another layer of having a robust, which is transparent. Conclusion for moderators meeting, where applications are judged and assessed. They come up with some recommendations, programs, should be funded, and then that is presented to council workshop, council SME. Council generally, it will go to the council's ordinary endorsement on the 8th of December. So following that, we'll send out notifications to successful and project delivery period for this round. If you're successful, your project needs to be completed between 1st of January 2023 and 31st of December 2023. So the acquittal then is due 30 days after end date, which is 31st of January 2020. So if you had a project where delivered in April 2024, you'd actually wait till round 19 will open. So let's have a look at the grant program changes. The first thing I'd like to let you know about is the changes to our funding agreement, which was previously known as the deed of agreement. So in the past, successful applicants were sent an email and it had a deed of agreement attached, and you were able to download that, print it off, I think it was 4 pages, sign each page, upload it, attach it to your Smarty Grants claim form. But in the interest of zero emissions and simplifying things, this round, if you are successful, you'll be asked to go back into your Smarty Grants account, and there'll be a deed of funding agreement as a form attached to your account, and it'll be a one-pager where you will actually just type out your name and answer some questions. So, for example, in the deed of agreement, instead of uploading your insurance at the application stage, if it's identified as a special condition that you need to supply insurance, there will be a section in the deed of agreement that says you need to upload your insurance. The other new thing is we have introduced some variation request forms for Smarty Grants. So on the chance that you need to ask for an extension in the timing completion of your project and change in the scope of your project, we will attach a variation request form to your Smarty Grants account, and you'll go in and complete that form. It will be sent to a senior manager to review and approve or not approve. The timing and scope variation requests are not encouraged. We're hopeful that everything goes smoothly and the project is scoped really well at the pre-application application stage that this isn't required, but occasionally it is required. So there is options to submit a timing and scope variation form. And just on the scope form, generally speaking, request to change the scope of your original project. We ask that it's usually in line with the original application. It's not a completely different project. So, for example, if you were funded to construct a shade sail and you put in, you want to change the scope and you want to events, may not be approved. It needs to be sort of keeping with the original scope of the project. That's because the original applications are approved by council or council laws. So we don't really have the authority to completely change the scope of a project without going through that due process. Just keep that in mind. The other change that we've had this round is that in previous rounds we've had the Community Environment and Climate Change projects as the grant title. So the Environment and Climate Change portion of the grant has been taken out and will be delivered as a completely separate program. So if anyone's interested in submitting a project or activity for environment and climate change project, just email me, and once I know the new dates that will roll out, I can let you know. But for this round, moving forward, the community grant, round 18 will be just community grants. So the next thing I want to show you is the application form and the budget, because there's been some changes to that as well. So I'll just bring up how to access a council grant. So if you go to council's grants page on their website, you'll see, if you haven't already had a look or start your application, there's a little button here which you can press on to start your application. And if you haven't commenced one already, you click on the button here, Community Grants Round 18 to RADF. The button's down here, there's some other grants open at the moment as well. I've actually already logged. No. So I've clicked on my submissions because I've done a test one already, and I've called it Tennis Court Redevelopment Shade Sail. So this will be my example to show you guys. So start of the application is very similar to last round in that it asks for your eligibility. So there's a little link here that you can click on to check the guidelines and eligibility criteria to see that you, and it tells you a little bit about what you may need to start your application. Frequently asked questions, help guide for applicants here, and then my phone number and email. So this is an example I said, so I've just popped in here that the organisation name is the Twitter Tennis Club. I've read the guidelines and I'm eligible, so ticked yes. If you spoke to a council officer, what was their name? Not compulsory to speak to a council officer, but we do highly recommend it. It does help. The next question, are you a legal not-for-profit entity, is defined by ATO, and I've ticked we're a accredited association. The next question, I've just ticked it's a recreation project, and I've ticked the insurances that we have. So this year, we're not asking to upload the insurance that will come with this. Next page asks for project details. So I've called mine the Tennis Court Redevelopment Shade Sales Project, and I've popped in the address. Project's going to be taken. First question, description of your project. What are you going to do? You don't need to write an essay. It just needs to be very concise, to the point, brief and concise as you can possibly make it. So I've written to develop 2 lawn tennis turf courts and install shade sail over the existing spectator tiered seating. Plan to rip up the existing turf courts and subsoil and replace the new subsoil natural lawn turf. New irrigation will be installed to enable the courts to be watered efficiently. Also install a shade sail that is commercial grade shade cloth offering 95% UV protection over tiered seating. Put in a project start and end date, which is within those timelines that I showed you earlier. And just note that when you put in project end date, that will pre-populate into the funding agreement if you're successful as your project end date. So coordinate that. So it doesn't have to be right to the end of the grant timeline. If you think you can get it done within 3 months, you can get it done. So the next question, why is this project needed? So consider what problem it will solve. And I've written the existing courts were laid over 30 years ago, and due to many years of wear and tear, the courts are undulated, patchy, in a state of disrepair. The current state of the courts render them dangerous to participants and do not provide a suitable surface that enables skill development. We do not have quality courts to conduct junior tennis coaching, post-regional tournaments. There is no shade on site near the courts to protect participants and spectators and umpires from harmful bee rays. Next question, what benefits will this project deliver? And I've just popped in the shelter will encourage more spectators and more encouraging atmosphere, which will result in more participation in tennis and encourage an increase in club membership, which will also result in greater income for the club. New turf courts will enable the club to employ a tennis coach and provide junior tennis. This will lead to new junior members and strengthen our membership base going forward. The turf courts will also enable us to apply for regional tennis tournaments, which will be a financial boost to our club through drinks catering sponsorship. Lastly, describe how your organisation has capacity and capability to deliver the project within the required timeframes. And I've written, we have had technical plans completed by an engineer for the design of the shade structure. We have provided these to council's building and planning team and they have been approved. We've had the shade structure plans costed and quoted by first grade sheds and structures. We have consulted with Tennis Australia before having the turf court foundation designed and the type of turf confirmed. We've had an irrigation plan completed by specialist irrigation, and this has been reviewed by Tennis Queensland and approved by council. We believe we are shovel ready to commence seeking funding to complete the project as all design costs and approvals have been obtained. And yeah, that's really important to make sure that you're shovel ready. I'm just going to touch on a few projects recently that have made the assumption that when they're being funded by council for a project that it means everything has been approved in regards to building and planning and heritage, and that's not necessarily the case. We do consult with them during the assessment process, but we do highly recommend that you go through that planning process first, having your designs and approvals all done, then you get the money and then you deliver. Otherwise you might find yourself in a situation that it's taking a long time to get your approvals. The cost of goods has gone up and you have a shortfall in delivering the project, and that makes it really challenging to deliver the project and on time. So the next page, who's involved. So this is new as well. So it's looking sort of what the outcomes of the project in terms of how many people may have impacted. So how many members do you have? Estimate how many people will be directly involved in coordinating your project or event. Estimate out of all the people involved in coordinating your event, how many will be volunteers, and overall, how many people will directly benefit from this particular project or event in the wider community. Just pop some numbers in there. If you're collaborating with anyone, the name of who you're collaborating with and their contribution to your project. This section here is consent. So if your project is to host an event, there's a link here to the council's event application form. So I highly suggest that gets completed and submitted to council once you're successful within 4 or 6 weeks of you hosting your event, and that would be a condition of funding. If you're hosting an event, that you have that event permit secured at least 6 weeks before the event. Who owns the land where the project or event is taking place? Has your organisation sought permission from the landowner or manager? Yes, no, not required. And if it is, there's an option here, it's not compulsory, but there's an option here to choose a file if you want to upload an email or something that proves that you do have permission from council after having spoken to building. So just on that also, it's very good to speak to your community development officer in the pre-planning stage before your application, so that you do know sort of what you do need to do in terms of getting that approval. So next is a project budget. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We'll go through a couple of examples on the project budget. Do a bit more complicated one, and then we'll do a simple one. So this hasn't changed here. This is council's requirement in terms of written quotes. So if you have a line item or an expenditure item that costs over $1,000, but it's between 1,007,499, there's one written quote required. If it's over 7,500, it's 3 quotes required. So the project budget. So I recommend starting with filling out your expenditure. So if we go with the tennis redevelopment project as an example, so I'm going to just leave income for a moment. You'll see it's on expenditure and income. I'll explain that in a moment, but I'm just going to pop in a couple of examples. This is the contractor to dig out the courts, and that is $3,000. Then we want to lay, fill, and new turf. A quote, and that's going to cost $5,000. So I'm not putting any dollar signs in here, any commas or anything. It's just a straight number. $5,000, and we're going to have someone come in and that's $800. Then I'm going to wait for a shade structure, and that was $5,000. And the footings is going to cost $3,000. The shade itself is $3,000. So in terms of quotes, all of them except for this one here are over 1,000, but under 7,499. So I'd have to get one quote for each of those line items. You'll see down the bottom here that this equals $24,800. Just checking my example here. So $24,800. Then we actually had a discussion. We need to take all the turf and fill away to the tip, but we have volunteers from our club that have all agreed to do that for us. So standard sort of charge at the moment for general labour is $46 an hour. So we've worked out it's going to take 12 hours. Got 4 people to do that. So $46 an hour at 12 hours is times 4 people is 2,200. So the in-kind is really useful to pop in because it actually shows the assessors that you are making a contribution to the project. So instead of putting $0, which could also be the case if this project you're just purchasing equipment and you don't need to do anything. But if you is an opportunity you are doing something for your project, it's good to work out an in-kind component because it shows you are making a contribution that has a value on it. So we can see here the total project expenditure, the total cost of the project is $27,008. This cell over here is automatically adds up the income and expenditure. So to progress this application, this cell here needs to say $0. So that's actually forcing applicants to make sure their budget balances, because it can be quite confusing for the assessors when it doesn't balance. It's hard to make sense of it sometimes. So after doing the expenditure and you've got all your quotes and you've popped everything in, you're confident you've got everything covered, then I would do the income. So our income is on both sides is going to be pop that in. And we know that our organisation, we've fundraised and we have $4,800 to contribute towards this project. We've actually also applied to Tennis Queensland of $7,000. I don't know if we've got that yet, but we're going to pop it in anyway because we're counting on getting this money to get all this completed. So we can see here that we're short $13,000. So that $13,000, we're going to ask council for that difference. So that brings it back to $0, the income and expenditure balance, and then we can move forward with the application. So I'll go through the rest of the application, show you what the rest looks like, then I'll come back to the budget and I'll do another example just to show you that again. So the total cost of the project, this is a little bit repetitive. It's our project. The funding amount we're asking council is $13,000. Our financial contribution is $4,800. It's 2,258. I'm just going to go back. Sorry, I'm just going to explain something else. So if you were applying for a project that is an infrastructure project, and say it was worth $9,000 the whole project, council will only fund 50% of an infrastructure project. So this is where the in-kind does help out. So if you were wanting to reach that 50% mark, yeah, that's where this would actually help you reach that 50% quota. So council would putting in 13, and then you would putting in 5, 6, 7, 8, 8.5. So you probably have to bump that in-kind up a bit to try and get the 50%. But that gives you a bit of an idea how that helps out. So here we've got, please list the items from your budget that you're requesting funding for. So this is where you'd go back and go, okay, well, we're asking for council for 13,000. They want to know what components of this project they're funding. You could have a project that you've included catering for $3,000. Council doesn't fund catering, so you wouldn't include catering as the portion of the whole project that you're asking council to fund. So you'd go back and you'd say 5,000 there. So we want council to pay for the shade structure, the irrigation, and the footings. So that works out to be $13,000. So it's just kind of specifying here. Council want to know what whole portion of the project or what part of the project are they funding. If there's a shortfall in funding, please advise how this will be addressed. So I've written we would undertake additional fundraising and install the shade sales part of stage 2. So the shade sales and the footings are worth about $6,000. So if we didn't get the tennis grant, that we would fundraise 1,000, and then we would actually do the footings and the shade sale as stage 2. So it might be another future grant to finish that off. Please list any unconfirmed income. So this is where you put Tennis Queensland grants to be confirmed. Little link here to upload your quotes, and then there's an option here to add any information that you want to explain about the quotes if you have to. So remember your quotes, the value that you put in the budget is ex GST. So if you get a quote for 5,500, that's plus GST, you put in 5,000. So it's the ex GST amount of that quote. Okay, so financial statement goes here. Next page, your applicant details. That's pretty straightforward. Your ABN number, the contact person. If your project is infrastructure project, you tick yes, this page will open up. If you click no, it will just you can just go to the next page. So this question here, because it is an infrastructure project, we're constructing a large shade structure. I've ticked yes. Do you meet council's co-funding requirements? If you include the tennis grant, the in-kind, and the club's contributions, a yes. Who owns the land where the project work is to be undertaken? So you just tick the appropriate box. And then this section here is request to conduct works on council-owned or managed land. So some of you may have seen this form before, but I'll just click on this. So this is the form here, and this is where you fill it out, and that would go off to council's planning, heritage, etc. department to get their approval. Certification. So this is how you acknowledge council. So I've popped in social media, club newsletters, signage on site. So signage on site's a really good one. Also popping on council's logo on your website as a sponsor, which suffice as well. And then it's just ticking a few boxes, filling out who completed the project and submitting it. I'll just go back now and do another example of the budget for you because I think that's important. So I'll do a simple one. So, a music event. So, an example here for a music event. So again, I'm going to start with expenditure first, and I'm going to hire some line dancing event. Hiring of the chairs is $2,500. And we're going to do some advertising is $800. And we need to do some traffic management. Gear. So we need, we actually need to have someone help with traffic management on the night, but we've got a volunteer to do that. So we've got one volunteer that's going to do it for 10 hours at $46 an hour, so that's $400 that we're making a contribution. So I'll pop the show council that we are contributing something that's worth dollar value. And our club has $250. So that leaves, if you look, short $5,800. So we need to ask council. Okay, zero. So if your club had potentially contribute $1,260, then you only need to ask council $5,000. The easiest way to work this out, sort of to work backwards. Get all your costs, work out what your in-kind contribution may be. You might not have any contribution, you might not have any money to give. Then you would ask council. Okay as well. So hopefully that has helped. To have a look at that. So back to just going to go through 10 grant tips, which we probably have touched on some of it, but we'll go through this quickly. And if you've got any questions, if you want to stay on and have a chat, that will be fine. So first thing, definitely read the guidelines and consider your eligibility criteria to understand what's being asked of you. Make sure also make sure you've got all of your items ready to go for the application. Number 2, plan your project. Speak to a community development officer. Draft up a project plan of what needs to happen, when it's going to happen, how long it's going to take to happen. Obtain your quotes and design specifications so that you're shovel ready. Do all the pre-planning first, and then money roll out. Number 3, have you sought permission from the landowner? Do you have community support approval? Check what approvals you may require. Number 4, include supporting material to strengthen your application, like photos, letters of support, plans and strategies. But don't always assume that the person assessing the application knows about your project. Photos speak 1,000 words. Really quite an impact to see a photo of something that's not quite what you thought it was. So keep that in mind. Start your application now. Don't leave it to the last minute. Write a draft and ask someone else to review it. Might make sense to you, but it may not make sense to the person reading it. So it does always help to have someone else read over it. Number 6, a good application is short to the point but gives all the information required. Be clear and concise. You don't need to write an essay to get your point across. Demonstrate the community need for your project and the broader community benefit. Why is the project necessary? What issues are you trying to solve? So remember, this is a community grant, so looking to provide community benefit that the project's open to for lots of people to enjoy and be involved. Number 8, make sure your project is detailed and balanced, which it will have to be, and includes in-kind support or other sources of funding if it's relevant. Number 9, sell yourself. Don't assume the assessment panel already knows about you and what you do. Number 10, check the closing date and time. The grant closes at 12 noon, not 5 p.m. So a few people have come unstuck with that. You could have technical issues as well. So it's always good to try and get in early. My email address is here. Here's a link to the grants page, Council's grant page on Smarty Grants to start your application, and my phone number is there. So I'm just happy to take questions if you want to ask any questions, or if you've want to chat, that's fine. Oh, I can just see now, Jane, I've just gone out to chat that I can see that you're having trouble hearing me.